Stop right there! Police! Please, you have to listen to me! I didn't do anything wrong! This is all a mistake!
Frank Delgado thought he had already found the hardest truth this town had to offer him. He was wrong. Sitting alone in a locked office at 3 in the morning, staring at numbers written in a dead man's own handwriting, Frank finally understood that Walt Ashford had not simply lost control of his truck on a rainy October night. Someone inside that building had been quietly working for over a year to make sure this business collapsed, and Frank was about to learn exactly how close his old friend had come to catching them before it was too late. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It began with something small enough to almost miss entirely, a single delivery invoice that did not quite match what had actually arrived at the shop that week. Then came a parts order bill that nearly doubled the going rate, buried among dozens of ordinary receipts. Then a recurring consulting fee, paid out every single month to a name Frank had never once heard mentioned inside that building, stretching back well over a year in the records. None of it looked dramatic on its own. Each piece looked like the kind of small clerical mistake any business might make from time to time. But Frank had spent 22 years learning that patterns rarely lie, even when every individual piece of them looks completely innocent sitting by itself. One night, long after every mechanic and every light in the shop had gone dark, Frank let himself quietly into Walt's old office, a room that had sat untouched since the accident, still faintly smelling of the same aftershave Frank remembered from 20 years earlier. Behind an old stack of parts catalogs, he found a locked file cabinet nobody had thought to mention to him. Inside it sat a second set of ledgers, written entirely by hand, in handwriting Frank recognized instantly and painfully. Notes filled the margins. Question marks sat beside specific invoices. And near the center of one page, a single name was circled twice in red ink, a name belonging to a man everyone in this town had trusted completely for 15 years. That name belonged to Dale Perkins, the shop's longtime accountant, a man Tyler had always considered one of his father's oldest and most loyal friends. The math, once Frank laid it all out in front of him on that desk, became impossible to explain away as coincidence. For over a year, expenses had been quietly inflated on paper. Revenue had been quietly underreported. A steady stream of loan repayments had been leaving the business every month, flowing toward an account Frank did not recognize at all. This shop was never actually failing the way everyone believed. It had been carefully, deliberately made to look like it was failing, one small falsified number at a time, by someone who understood exactly how to hide in plain sight. And the timeline sitting in front of Frank made his stomach turn in a way numbers rarely did. This had not started after Walt Ashford's death, the way anyone might have assumed. It had started a full 13 months before the accident ever happened. Frank sat alone in that office until nearly 3 in the morning, staring at Walt's own handwriting, at the same worried, careful notes his old friend must have been quietly making in the final weeks of his life. Question marks that were never answered. A man asking the right questions who never got the chance to finish what he had started asking them about. Frank finally understood, with a weight settling deep in his chest, that this was never simply a struggling family business at all. This was a business someone had deliberately, patiently broken from the inside, and Walt had been getting dangerously close to discovering exactly who was responsible before his life ended on that rain-soaked road. Frank photographed every single page of that private ledger with his phone, careful and methodical, then locked the cabinet back exactly the way he had found it so no one would ever know he had been there. He drove home that night with his headlights the only source of light for miles along Route 9, the very same stretch of road. He realized with a slow and creeping chill where Walt's accident had happened less than a year earlier. The rain had not started yet, but something in Frank's chest told him the storm was only just beginning. 2 towns over, inside a glass-walled office on the top floor of a regional company headquarters, a man named Rick Voss was carrying far more pressure than anyone back at that small-town garage ever realized. The company's expansion plans had stalled badly that quarter. 2 other acquisition deals had already fallen apart, and Voss's numbers were quietly becoming the worst in the entire company. His own job now depended entirely on closing this one particular deal, and closing it as cheaply as humanly possible. He had spent over a year quietly counting on Dale Perkins's monthly financial reports that made a struggling family shop look weaker and weaker with every passing month. Exactly the kind of justification his own bosses wanted to see on paper. What Rick Voss did not know, or perhaps simply chose not to ask about too closely, was exactly how far Dale Perkins had truly been willing to go to keep those numbers falling in the right direction. Voss told himself this was simply aggressive accounting, the kind of thing every insider in this industry quietly accepted as completely normal business practice. He never once asked the kind of question he genuinely did not want answered out loud. But the deadline sitting on his desk was very real, and it was getting closer by the day. His own company's board had given him until the very end of the month to finalize this acquisition, or lose the entire budget for it permanently, along with whatever was left of his career. Every single week that this small-town garage looked more stable instead of less was another week of Rick Voss's own future slipping quietly through his fingers. He began calling Dale Perkins twice a day instead of once a week, his voice growing tighter and more anxious with every conversation. "I need those numbers moving in the right direction," Voss told him during one particular call, his voice sharper than usual. "Whatever it takes. We are running out of time here." Dale Perkins did not know it in that moment, could not have possibly known it. But that single phone call would eventually become one of the very pieces of evidence that finally broke this entire case wide open for everyone involved. Frank moved carefully from that point forward, the same way he had learned to move over 2 decades spent managing logistics for the United States Army. Going in loud got a man absolutely nowhere, and it very often got him caught before he ever found what he was actually looking for. He requested copies of the shop's complete financial records, framing it simply as a routine management review, a request Dale Perkins approved without a second thought, clearly never once suspecting that this quiet new manager might actually understand exactly what he was looking at inside those documents. That single moment of confidence would turn out to be the first real mistake Dale Perkins ever made in over a year of careful planning. Over the following weeks, Frank cross-referenced every single invoice against the shop's actual delivery records, every consulting fee against services that had genuinely been rendered, every reported dip in revenue against the repair logs mechanics filled out by hand every single day. Those repair logs, it turned out, had never once been forged, because Dale Perkins had never imagined anyone would actually bother checking them against anything else. The pattern that slowly emerged left absolutely no room for doubt. Perkins had been quietly siphoning money out of this business for well over a year, funneling inflated expenses through a shell vendor account that, as far as Frank could determine, had no real warehouse, no real employees, and no real parts sitting anywhere inside it at all. And underneath all of it sat a payout structure designed with real care. A bonus tied directly to the final sale price, the very moment Cortland completed its acquisition of this small-town garage. The lower that sale price could be justified on paper, the larger Dale Perkins's own payout would be once the deal finally closed. This was never simply a man skimming a little extra money off the top out of quiet greed. This was a man actively engineering the slow collapse of a business he had pretended to care about for 15 years, and quietly profiting from every single stage of its funeral along the way, one falsified invoice at a time. Frank reached out quietly to an old contact from his final years of service, a sharp forensic accountant named Denise Callahan, who owed him a genuine debt from years earlier, back when Frank had helped clear her husband's name during an unfair supply fraud investigation that very nearly ended his career for good. Denise agreed to review everything Frank had gathered, entirely off the books, without involving a single other person at the shop just yet. "This isn't sloppy," Denise told him quietly over the phone one night, after her very first careful pass through all the documents. "This is careful. Whoever is doing this has done something like it before, or studied exactly how to." Frank thought of the 7 managers who had walked out that door before he ever arrived, of Tyler's spiraling temper during those long, difficult months, of a business that had genuinely seemed doomed no matter how hard anyone inside it tried to save it. None of that had ever been a simple accident. A man sitting in a position of complete and total trust had spent well over a year quietly making absolutely certain of it. And then Frank found himself thinking of Walt, driving home alone in the pouring rain during the exact week he had first started asking careful questions about these very same books. The same week, Frank now realized with a cold and sinking feeling settling into his chest that Perkins's fraud had come closest to finally being discovered by the one man capable of stopping it. He did not yet have proof of anything beyond simple financial misconduct sitting on paper. Not yet. But the timing itself sat heavy in his chest like a stone. He could not find any way to set back down again. And he did not tell Tyler. Not yet. Not any of it. Some quiet part of him, the same disciplined part that had spent 20 years carefully learning never to move on unconfirmed intelligence, wanted absolute certainty before he handed a grieving young son a brand new reason to reopen the very worst week of his entire life. That single moment of caution, born from years of careful discipline, would very nearly end up costing Frank everything he had come to Millbrook to protect. Frank made exactly one mistake through all of this, and it was a costly one. He underestimated just how long Dale Perkins had quietly been watching his own back, preparing in advance for a moment exactly like this one. The instant Perkins noticed which financial records Frank had pulled and requested, he did not panic the way a careless man might have. He had already spent over a year quietly preparing for this exact possibility, patiently laying the groundwork for a fallback plan he hoped he would never actually need. Within a matter of days, an entirely new set of documents began quietly surfacing around the shop, forged bank transfers, and carefully doctored emails, all built with real precision to suggest one very specific and convenient conclusion. That conclusion pointed directly at Frank Delgado, the newest manager with no prior ties to this company at all, painting him as the one quietly diverting funds out of the business all along. Dale Perkins carried those documents straight to Tyler himself, his voice carefully rehearsed and full of practiced concern. "I didn't want to believe it either," Perkins told him, laying the papers down across the desk with real deliberate care. "But I've known your father's business inside and out for 15 years now, son. These numbers simply do not lie to anyone willing to look closely enough at them. Your new manager has been quietly stealing from you since the very day he first walked through that front door." For the very first time since Frank had ever arrived in Millbrook, Tyler genuinely did not know what to believe anymore. Dale Perkins had been a steady fixture in his life since early childhood, a man who sent him a birthday card every single year without fail, a man who had stood quietly beside him at his own father's funeral without ever once being asked. Frank, by comparison, was still very much a stranger in so many important ways. A man who had never once fully explained why he showed up out of nowhere, who never spoke openly about his own past, who had taken this job under circumstances nobody around him had ever fully understood or questioned closely enough. Perkins pushed harder than he strictly needed to in that moment, sensing a genuine opening had finally presented itself after all this time. He gently suggested Tyler call the police that very same night, before Frank could possibly find any way to cover his tracks. He suggested, just as gently, that Tyler frees Frank completely out of every financial system inside the company immediately. Looking back on it later, Tyler would come to realize that very same sense of manufactured urgency should have been the clearest warning sign of all. But grief and doubt have a quiet way of making people move far faster than they ever should, especially when the person applying pressure has known exactly which buttons to press for most of their entire life. Tyler confronted Frank that same evening, the forged documents gripped tightly in his hand, more genuinely hurt in that moment than he was outright angry. "I trusted you," Tyler said, his voice cracking slightly despite every effort to hold it steady. "I actually started to trust you, completely, and this entire time. I didn't take anything," Frank said quietly, his voice remaining calm, and even despite the accusation hanging in the air between them. "But I understand exactly why it looks that way to you right now. And I understand completely why you would choose to believe him over me in this moment." "Then explain it to me," Tyler said. "Just explain all of it, right now." Frank hesitated for a long moment, because explaining everything meant finally telling Tyler the entire truth, all at once, under exactly the wrong circumstances. Who he truly was. Why he had really come to this town in the first place. And he was not ready. Not like this. Not framed as a desperate man's defense. Not with Tyler's fragile trust hanging by a single thread that Perkins had come dangerously close to cutting completely. "I need one more week," Frank said instead, his voice steady and unwavering. "Give me that much, and I will show you the entire truth. All of it. Exactly as it happened." Tyler stared back at him for a long, heavy moment, torn painfully between a man he barely knew and a man he had known for almost his entire life. Every single instinct Dale Perkins had spent 15 patient years carefully cultivating told Tyler, in that exact moment, to simply say no and end it right there. But something else, quieter and more stubborn, held him back from saying it. He found himself thinking about a small sticky note left on a workbench late one night. About a torque wrench, left exactly where he would need to find it without ever having to ask. About a fully restored Mustang sitting in that garage right now, more whole than anything else in his entire life had felt in over a year. "1 week, Tyler said finally, his voice quiet but resolute. "Don't make me regret this decision." Dale Perkins left the office that night far more rattled than he ever expected to feel, walking out into a cold parking lot with his carefully laid plan suddenly hanging by a thread of its own. He had planned, from the very beginning, for Frank to be fired on the spot that same night, escorted quietly off the property with no chance to explain himself to anyone at all. He had never once planned for a single week to stand between himself and everything he had spent over a year so carefully building. And somewhere deep down, walking alone toward his car under a flickering streetlight, Dale Perkins understood something he did not want to admit to himself just yet. A week, given to a man like Frank Delgado, might turn out to be exactly enough time for the entire truth to finally catch up with him, no matter how carefully he had covered his tracks along the way. That same week, Tyler finally drove out to collect the fully restored Mustang, the very car Frank had rebuilt from nothing during his very first week on the job. Tyler had put off picking it up for days, uneasy about driving something tied so closely to his father's memory. But with everything around him quietly falling apart, he needed somewhere quiet to sit and think clearly for the first time in what felt like months. Sliding into the driver's seat, running his hand slowly along the freshly restored dashboard, Tyler opened the glove box purely out of old habit and found an envelope tucked deep inside it, slightly yellowed with age, his father's own handwriting written plainly across the front. "For whoever finds this next," it read. Walt must have hidden that envelope inside the car months before the accident. Somewhere in the middle of a restoration, he never got the chance to finish himself. Inside it was a letter, one Walt had written the week before he died. Careful and worried, clearly still working through suspicions he had not yet fully confirmed for himself. He wrote about strange numbers he had begun noticing in the books, about a growing unease he could not quite shake concerning someone very close to him. He wrote about Tyler too, not with disappointment, but with a father's plain and aching hope that his son would someday find his own way into the family trade, in his own time, without ever being pushed too hard toward it. And near the very bottom of the page, one single line stopped Tyler's breath completely. If something ever happens to me, and this business finds itself in real trouble, there is only one man in this world I would trust completely to set it right again. His name is Frank Delgado. He saved my life once, a very long time ago, and he is the finest man I have ever known in my entire life. If he ever comes looking for you, son, please let him in. Tyler sat in that car for a long, silent time, the letter shaking gently in his hands, the whole world around him suddenly rearranging itself into a shape that finally made sense. Every single unexplained thing about Frank suddenly made complete sense to him all at once. The quiet arrival with no explanation offered, the steady refusal to ever talk about himself, the endless patience that never once ran dry, no matter how badly Tyler had treated him from the very first day. He had never come here chasing a paycheck. He had never come here simply to run a shop. He had come to finally keep a promise made to a dead man. A promise Tyler had never even known his own father had quietly asked someone to make on his behalf. Tyler drove straight back to the shop that same night, letter still gripped tightly in his hand, and found Frank exactly where he always was, still going over the same financial records for what felt like the 100th time. "You knew my father," Tyler said. It was not phrased as a question at all. Frank looked up slowly, and for the very first time since arriving in Millbrook, something in his usual composure finally cracked open completely. "He saved my life," Frank said quietly. "I came here to keep a promise I never got the chance to make out loud while he was still alive to hear it." Tyler set the letter gently down on the desk between them. He watched Frank read his own name written in Walt's familiar handwriting, watched the older man's jaw tighten slowly, watched him press 2 fingers briefly against his own eyes before setting the letter back down with a careful, quiet gentleness usually reserved only for something breakable. 22 years, Frank said finally, his voice rough and unsteady in a way Tyler had never once heard from him before. "I never got to properly thank him. I told myself if I ever got the chance, I would find some way to pay it all back somehow." He looked up slowly at Tyler. "I did not expect it would end up looking anything like this." "Neither did I," Tyler said quietly. For a long moment, neither one of them said another single word. Then Tyler pulled out the very same chair Dale Perkins had sat in only 3 nights earlier, laying his forged documents down like some kind of quiet verdict, and sat down across from Frank instead. "Then let's finish exactly what he started together," Tyler said. With Tyler finally standing fully on his side, without a single trace of hesitation left in him, the final pieces of this entire puzzle came together remarkably fast. Frank laid out absolutely everything in careful order: the falsified expense reports, the inflated invoices, the shell vendor account that existed only on paper, the payout tied directly to Corlin's final acquisition price, and Denise Callahan's independent forensic review confirming every single piece of it beyond any reasonable doubt. Tyler, acting for the very first time with the same quiet authority his father's own name had always carried around this town, reached out personally to a local business journalist named Priya, someone he had known since high school, someone Dale Perkins would never see coming, and someone this entire town already trusted completely. They brought Denise informally to verify every single number beyond any possible doubt before making any public move at all, because both men understood clearly that Dale Perkins would never simply go down quietly, not without trying to discredit them first, exactly the same way he had already tried to frame Frank only days earlier. 2 full days before Corlin's acquisition offer was set to quietly expire, the very same deadline Perkins and Voss had carefully engineered from the beginning to force a rushed and desperate decision. Tyler called every single employee together for a meeting inside the main garage bay. Every mechanic, every longtime worker who had somehow stuck around through an entire year of complete chaos, gathered quietly beneath the same fluorescent lights where Walt Ashford himself used to hold his own morning briefings. Ray stood near the very front of the crowd, arms crossed tightly over his chest, still dressed in his work coveralls from that morning's shift. 2 mechanics who had quietly reconsidered leaving during Frank's very first week stood together near the back, whispering nervously to each other, unsure of exactly what was about to happen. Even a few former employees, tipped off through simple word of mouth that something enormous was unfolding, had quietly shown up that morning just to watch it happen for themselves. Tyler laid the real, unaltered financial records out across a workbench in front of absolutely everyone in that room. Frank stood quietly beside him, saying nothing at all, letting Tyler tell this story entirely in his own words, because Frank understood, better than almost anyone alive, that this moment needed to belong to Tyler alone. For over a year, Tyler said, his voice steadier in that moment than it had ever once been inside that building before, someone we all trusted completely made every single one of you believe this shop was slowly dying. It was not dying at all. It was being deliberately killed on purpose, so it could be quietly sold out from underneath every single person standing in this room right now. A low murmur moved through the crowd almost instantly. Ray's arms slowly uncrossed at his sides. Dale Perkins, called into that meeting under the simple pretense of a routine review, went visibly pale the moment he saw the real documents laid out plainly in front of him. He tried, briefly, to bluster his way through a flat denial, insisting the discrepancies were nothing more than simple accounting errors. He even claimed, quite plainly, that he had never once heard of the shell company sitting at the center of it all, until Denise Callahan calmly walked the entire room through every single transfer, invoice by invoice, including a recorded phone call Rick Voss never once imagined would ever matter to anyone, a call in which he had pressed Perkins directly to move the numbers, whatever it takes. The entire room went completely silent. "You let us believe we were losing everything," Ray said quietly, the very first person in that room brave enough to speak. "My daughter's surgery. I nearly took on a second job because I genuinely believed this place was going under for good." Dale Perkins had absolutely no answer left for that. He simply stood there in silence. The very same forged documents he had once laid so confidently across Tyler's desk now worth exactly nothing at all. Rick Voss and his company withdrew their acquisition offer within the hour, the moment Priya called their corporate office directly for an official comment, unwilling to be publicly connected to an active fraud investigation just as her story was preparing to go to print. Local police were called that very same afternoon. Dale Perkins was formally arrested 3 days later, once the full story finally broke publicly and Denise's completed forensic report was officially filed with the county prosecutor's office. The shop that 7 different managers had once fled from, the same shop an entire town had quietly written off as doomed beyond saving, had not been rescued by money, or by simple luck, or by some outside buyer swooping in at the last possible moment. It had been saved entirely by the truth, and by 2 men who had simply refused to stop searching for it, no matter what it cost either one of them personally. 6 months later, the very same garage, now proudly carrying Frank's own name across its sign, over his own repeated objections, was busier than it had been in years. Every single mechanic who had stayed through the very worst of it was still there, still working the same familiar bays every morning. Two who had quit under Tyler's old management eventually came back, cautiously at first, and ended up staying for good this time. Ray's daughter, as it turned out, came through her surgery just fine. He brought in a box of donuts the following Monday morning without offering any explanation at all, and nobody in that shop ever thought to ask him why. Tyler worked the floor himself now, instead of hiding behind a desk the way he once had. Wearing coveralls instead of an expensive jacket, his hands permanently stained with the same kind of grease his own father used to wear proudly like a badge of honor. He was not perfect at the work yet, not even close. But he showed up every single day, without fail, which turned out to be the one simple thing that had never once come naturally to him before all of this happened. One quiet afternoon, a nervous young mechanic walked in for his very first day on the job, barely 20 years old, clearly braced for the shop's old reputation of chewing people up and spitting them right back out again. Tyler walked over calmly, handed him a set of keys without a single word of pity attached to the gesture, and said simply, "That bay right there is yours now. Take your time with it. Nobody around here is in any kind of hurry anymore." Frank watched quietly from the office doorway, the very same stillness that had once so deeply unsettled Tyler on his first day inside that building. But it looked entirely different now, less like a wall standing between two people, more like something closer to real peace. He never did explain the full story to most of the staff, who Walt had truly been to him, what he had carried quietly across 2 decades and half a world just to finally set it down inside a small garage in Ohio. Some debts, Frank had come to genuinely believe over these past several months, were never really meant to be explained out loud to anyone at all. They were simply meant to be kept, quietly, faithfully, for as long as it took. That evening, as the shop slowly emptied out and the lights along Route 9 flickered on one by one in the growing darkness, Tyler found Frank standing alone in the garage bay one final time before closing up for the night, standing quietly beside the very same fully restored Mustang that had somehow started all of this. "Thank you," Tyler said, "for staying, for never once giving up on me, even when I gave you every single reason in the world to walk away from all of it." Frank shook his head slightly, a faint and quiet smile crossing his weathered face for just a moment. "Your father never gave up on anybody either," he said. "Guess that particular trait simply runs in the family after all." Walt Ashford never got the chance to see the man his own son would eventually become. But somewhere, in the low and steady hum of an engine finally running exactly right, in a garage full of people who no longer flinched the moment that office door quietly opened, maybe, in some quiet way that never needed proving to anyone at all, he did get to see it after all.